Hi, everybody.
Good day, everyone. It's the
Okay,
Tom and Amelia show again.
all right. Okay, so we're moving into the second week of Lent. Well, next week, I guess. And the second week of our working our way through Mark's passion, death, and resurrection narrative. So Tom wants to do today's story in a little bit different way. I'm going to let him explain that.
I am aware in this story that there is a lot of depth of allusions to earlier stories in the gospel and earlier stories in the tradition of Israel. And so rather than my telling you the story and then explaining what those are, I thought this time, let's try. We'll identify what those things are, and then I'll tell the story at the end. So,
Okay, so which story are we focusing on today?
this is the story of the Passover meal, of the Last Supper. And it's the prophecy of Judas' betrayal, and then the story of the Passover meal.
Okay. All right, well, proceed.
Well, you know what they are, and you've got the questions. Just another word of background. Mark's audiences would have heard the whole story, and so the earlier stories in the gospel would have been fresh in their minds and their experience. And also, they were Judeans who knew the traditions of Israel, and for whom then the Passover was a time, the stories of the Passover were times of deep memories of the traditions of the Exodus, Moses, and so on. So that's what's in the background of this. And,
okay, Tom, you had some stories you wanted to tell, and I don't have a list of those, so you just go right ahead and tell the connection stories you had in mind.
Well, the first is the stories that of the feedings earlier in the gospel. The first is the feeding of the 5,000. And so these were 5,000 Judeans on the Galilee side of the lake. And the story has a formula. Jesus took bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. And they all ate, and they were all satisfied. And there were 5,000 who ate of that bread. But not long after that, they got into the boat and went across to the other side, and Jesus walked on the water to them, and they were amazed. And Mark explains, when they got into the boat, they were amazed because they didn't understand about the loaves, because their hearts were hardened. So the mystery of the loaves is established. Then there's a second story of a feeding of 4,000 on the other side of the lake, that is in Gentile territory. And Jesus again took the bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to them. And they all ate and were satisfied. There were 4,000 who ate. And they picked up 7 baskets full of broken pieces. After they go across the other side, some Pharisees are coming and they want a sign, and Jesus is utterly frustrated and says, "Forget it. I'm getting in the boat and going back to the other side." And so on the way, the disciples realize they only have one loaf of bread, because they didn't bring any. And Jesus says, "Why are you concerned about the bread? Don't you have eyes so that you can see? Do you not have ears so that you can hear? Are your hearts hardened? When I fed the 5,000, how many baskets did you pick up?" And they said, 12. "And when I fed the 4,000, how many?" They said, 7. Don't you understand? Well, do you all understand? So the mystery of the loaves only deepens. So that's the prelude to this story of Jesus taking the bread, blessing, breaking, blessing. Yeah, he gave it to them. They all ate. And he said, "This is my body." So that's one story of the background. Earlier in the gospel, a mystery that is here addressed in this story. Another story that precedes this is a very unusual thing, is that the story of the prophecy of Judas' betrayal comes after we've already been told as listeners about Judas going to the chief priests. So last week we ended with Judas going to the chief priests to hand him over and betray him to them. And this story, when they came on the evening of Passover and they had reclined and were eating, Jesus said, "One of you will betray me, one who is eating with me." Well, we already know who that one is. It's Judas Iscariot. But that's the background of this, and is then the source. Why doesn't Jesus say who he is? Why doesn't he out him? And furthermore, the implication is that he is the one of those to whom he gives his body. And likewise, in the word of the cup, the story is they all drank, he gave them the cup and they drank from it, all of them. The Greek there is very unusual. The word all comes at the end of the sentence where it almost never does. And so it's literally translated, they drank from it all. Well, the implication is even Judas, all of them drank from that cup. So that's another part of the background from earlier in the story. Another dimension of this is that Jesus, when he introduces the cup, says, "This cup is my blood of the covenant, poured out for many." Well, my blood of the covenant is an allusion to the story of the first covenant, that is, of the covenant with Israel, that Moses took the blood of the oxen, he poured half of it in basins, and the other half he dashed against the altar. And then he read the book of the covenant to them, and they all said, "We will do all that is said. We will be obedient." And so Moses then took the blood, and sprinkled it over the people. And this was the sign then of the covenant being established.
Wow, there's a ritual.
Right.
Lots of drama. My goodness.
Right.
Okay.
Well, this is an allusion to that this is my blood of the covenant, not the blood of the oxen at Sinai. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. And many is the hoi polloi. It's everybody. So what is distinctive about my blood of the covenant is that it's for not just Israel, but it's for all of humanity. It's for the many. That includes then the enemies of Israel. So it's an extension of the covenant.
But Jesus was very inclusive in his was become a very important regular religious rite for Christians.
Yep.
Let's back up to the bread a little bit. Why did Jesus call his body bread?
Well, the mystery of the loaves has been, what's the significance of the bread? And of this magical multiplication of the bread, so that, you know, the first thing, there were 5 loaves that Jesus broke, 5,000 people ate bread. He had 7 loaves. It was multiplied. So what is the significance of this magical, miraculous multiplication of the bread? Well, this is the answer to what the significance of those feedings was. These were covenant-making occasions. They were times of the establishment of the Eucharist and of Jesus' body. So what is multiplied? Jesus' body. So that in the bread, then, his body is given to everyone.
And that's okay.
So,
That's a multiplication of then the bread
right.
and his
And
body.
the multiplication of the loaves.
Yeah, right.
Is,
Okay. The body of Christ.
the mystery is that this was the body that is multiplied. So the implication is that these Eucharistic celebrations of Jesus' body being at the core of the celebration of the Eucharist is a sign of this multiplication of Jesus' body.
Okay. You haven't actually told the story yet, so I don't think you've referenced this yet, but at the end of it, Jesus says he's never going to drink of the fruit of the vine again until he drinks it in the kingdom. Is that
Right.
correct?
Yep.
And what is that about? Why does
Well,
he say that?
Yeah, this is a vow of abstinence. He says, you know, truly, never again will I drink of the fruit of the vine. And this is a tradition of the warriors of Israel, that they would take vows of abstinence. So Bathsheba's husband, Uriah, had taken a vow of abstinence from having sexual relations with his wife. And so when David had sex with her and she got pregnant, he brought him back and tried to get him to go and sleep with Bathsheba. He wouldn't do it because he had taken a vow of abstinence. And so this is a tradition of the warriors, is that they would take vows of abstinence from food or from drink or from sex in order to be focused on the battle. And so this is Jesus' vow of abstinence, a very difficult vow of abstinence from drinking wine, that later in the story, the memory of this vow comes because Jesus is offered wine mingled with myrrh before being crucified. He doesn't take it.
In order to help with the pain, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So the reason for they offered that was to, you know,
Mitigate
modify the
pain
pain a little bit.
Yeah.
But he doesn't take it because he had taken a vow of abstinence for his battle against.
Well, I guess it's also a way of him saying, I mean, he knows what he's going to face, as you're putting in a battle, and that he's going to die.
Right.
It's kind of prediction of that, I guess, that happened.
Yes.
So, well, maybe this would be a good time to go ahead and tell the story.
Okay, so with all of that and more that would have been present for the audiences of Mark.
Oh, wait, Tom, I forgot. There's at the big. This is a Passover meal, right? This last.
Right.
So
Yep.
certainly there would have been connections for them with regard to Passover.
Yep.
When that's mentioned, you want to just.
Well, the connections are prior to the story of the prophecy, the Jesus' disciples ask him, you know, where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover? And they go and they find an upper room and they prepare the Passover. And so the bread and the wine are then primary elements of the Passover meal. And so this is their last Passover together.
Which was the most, wasn't that the most important feast day in their tradition?
Yeah. Yep. This was
looking back to
celebration of
liberation
the liberation from slavery in Egypt. Yep.
Okay, now tell the story.
Okay.
I'll be quiet.
We'll see. So this is the story. When it was evening, Jesus came with the 12. And when they had reclined and were eating, Jesus said to them, "One of you will betray me and hand me over, one who is eating with me." And they began to be sad and to say to him one after another, not me." And Jesus said, "It is one of the 12, one who is dipping bread with me in the same dish. For the Son of Man goes as it is written of him. But woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would be better for that man if he had never been born." And then, while they were eating, Jesus took bread and he blessed it and he broke it and he gave it to them and said, "Take. This is my body." And when they had eaten, Jesus took the cup. And when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they drank from it, all of them. And Jesus said, "This cup is my blood of the covenant, poured out for many. And truly I say to you, never again will I drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God."
Yes. Thank you.
That's the story.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's such a somber story, and yet it really ends on a victorious note, a very optimistic, hopeful note, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
New wine of the kingdom of God.
Yeah, it's a very hopeful image and promise.
Yep.
Yeah. In the last couple minutes here, do you have any additional, besides inclusiveness, I think, connections to justice, peace and justice today?
Well, the implication of this story is that Jesus gives his life for everyone, including his enemies. So it is both for all of Israel. It's also for all the Gentiles, for all those who have dominated Israel over the centuries, who have been Israel's enemies. And so this is a primary action of peacemaking, of self-sacrifice for the sake of others. It's also striking that this vow of abstinence, which is a warrior's vow, is made by Jesus, who is wholly nonviolent. That is, he doesn't win the battle against the powers of evil by attacking and killing his enemies. He rather wins the battle by giving his life, his body, his blood, for the sake of a new relationship of love and commitment between Israel and the Gentiles, between people then and now who are enemies. And so what is implicit in this story is that God is seeking peace in the world, and that he is creating that by the ongoing offering of God's self, of God's love, of God's presence for all people. And so we're all part of, all human beings are part of this covenant that God is making with us. And that is then the source of universal justice and peace, is to learn from Jesus' way of establishing covenant relationships between all people, and relationships of love and commitment and self-sacrifice and nonviolence.
Thank you. Well, that'll give us something to think about this week, is how we can be a part of that.
Yep.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Let us know how it worked to do the story at the end rather than at the beginning.
Right.
At least it's a slight change in our pattern. So anyway, we're always interested in your feedback. So have a great week.
Have a great week, everyone.
Tell the story. Bye-bye.
Right.